So I'm going to talk about loaders and what they are for and why we should care about them and how we are going to implement them in our front ends. But first, I'm Knut. I'm running the developer community and education team at Sanity.io. And just like high level, what are we going to do in the next 20 minutes or so? We are going to talk a bit about visual editing and live previews. And we are going to talk about how we are getting content from Sanity now, and then how the future, which is now, is going to look like. We're going to take a little, not detour, but like we have to go a bit like around and look at how CMSs has evolved to understand why loaders is a thing and why we should kind of like care about them and start using them. So let's dive into it. First of all, what is the background here? Like, we want to have visual editing and live previews. Visual editing and live previews is like an editorial experience where you can click on things, and you get transported to where they can be edited. You edit the things and you see the change happen in real time. So you get kind of like this fast feedback loop, understanding what the changes will look like for your audience. And at the end of the day, what we are as developers and our content teams are doing, we're trying to make awesome experiences for the people we are trying to reach, right? So we want to have tools that accommodates for that. And visual editing and live preview is kind of like one of those tools. So if you have ever built with Sanity, you're pretty used to this code path where you set up a client, giving it its project ID and dataset to kind of like know where to get, like which content lake to get that content from, and maybe you put on the caching, and it's not here, but recently there's also perspectives, like should I only get the published content or should I get the newest content possible, including drafts? And then you take this client and import it into your route, for example, and you call client.fetch, and then you give it its Grok query. And that's kind of it. You get the data back and you can pass this data or content to your front-end template, whatever it is. Pretty simple, straightforward, but we are in the future and we have to do it a bit differently. And what we are going to do now from here on is to kind of do the same. We are creating a client, but we're giving it a bit extra information. And then we are initializing more tooling to help us do more stuff and come around the fact that a lot of us are operating with server-side rendering and client-side rendering, and things are become a bit more complicated, because hopefully we will also get better performance and all of those things that we're looking for. And the change is that we are going to add something called Stega. This has to do with content source maps. So the way we can tell a front end where the content is coming from, down to the field in a document and in the studio. And then we're also going to tell kind of like the client where it can find a studio to open these things. So that's what's happening here. We have something called set server client, and this is kind of like tooling that kind of like sets up a server client. It's on the tin with the client configuration. And then we're going to export load query from this file, so we can use that as well. And then pretty much same as client fetch, we are like using this function to run a query and then getting the content back, and a bit more stuff. And then if we are in a client-side component, we use like a similar function called useQuery, which is not only fetching the initial content, but it also keeps kind of like listening for changes and then updating the rendering tree with those changes. So that's kind of like live preview. And I will come back to these things in a bit and kind of like dive a bit more into it. But Knut, this seems like more code. Why would you have us write more code to kind of like do kind of the same thing? Yeah, I'm going to explain that. And hopefully I'm going to explain why it's worth it. So first of all, we have to go in and look at kind of like the CMS evolution. Like, why are we here? Why are we talking about making previews happen? So if we squint a bit, we had like the traditional CMSs. They were like monoliths, like it was like one box. I'm not sure if CMS ever came on the CD, but well, they probably did, right? And they made websites. And then we had the introduction of headless CMSs that kind of like got away with the template rendering and then just had APIs and let you kind of like bring your own framework. And then Sanity came and we offered like a more decoupled architecture with more powerful APIs and real-time capabilities and these things, as a lot of you know. The traditional CMS was very page-centric. It had no or very kind of like underpowered APIs. It has like opinionated template engine, so you basically have to use its template engine, and you had previews and maybe even visual editing, but it was very often based on refreshing. Kind of like every time you did a change or you had to like save a draft, it would kind of like refresh the page and show you the new stuff. It wasn't kind of live, right? With Hello CMS, you got a bit more flexible content model. It wasn't that page centric. You could bring your own front end. I would say like a lot of the APIs are still underpowered. Like they were based on RESTful patterns and so on. You had to like do a lot of fetching. They didn't like if they supported previews, it wasn't like global previews. So if you had like a view or a page that was consisted of different sources and documents and so on, you can only kind of see the changes you were doing in the document you were in. If someone else has changed something else, you kind of like didn't get that preview immediately without refreshing or something. It also lacked affordances for structured content in this way. If a document was used in different places, that wasn't really obvious. You didn't kind of like give the editor a good idea of what is the consequence of changing this. Will it change it in just this page or across a lot of pages, right? So some limits there. And then what we feel like we have managed to do is like we have the most flexible content modeling. I haven't seen another system that's kind of matches it in what you can do with how you structure things. We have pretty powerful APIs. Sanity was built fundamentally to be real-time from the ground up. It's not kind of like tacked on afterwards. We are striving to have like we call the right-sized primitives. So like the fundamental building blocks to make experiences like this. And we try to make specifications, not hacks. So content source maps, the technology that drives these overlays that you saw in the video, is based on a specification. And anyone can use that specification, and they actually do. Some other CMSs have also adopted this. And we think that is important. Kind of like this is about how we should work. And we are less opinionated about your front end. So we don't require you to run stuff through our kind of like magic component thing in order to make preview happen. We want you to kind of like have your front end as you want it, but have these capabilities as well. So the motivation behind loaders is how can we as developers provide excellent editorial experiences without compromising on our developer experience. We want to have fun too, right? We also want like less friction and all of those things. So content teams, they need a way to predict how new and edited content is going to be presented for the audiences. Not very unlikely what we want. Like when we code, we want to predict what will happen before going into production, right? For content teams, this is most often solved with previews. Like that's what everyone wants, right? And it looks like this. You edit something and it appears in the presentation and you kind of get an idea what's going on. Having a super fast feedback loop also makes this experience sweeter. As like hot module reloading for developers, right? Same thing, basically. Content teams also want less friction to get where content can be changed. And this is a pain that people who adopt structured content and kind of like make things that make sense for the business in a way. In presentation, you end up like a view can kind of consist of different things. It can be landing page with a shared CTA and like product information and all of that stuff. And it gets kind of like gnarly to get to the right place. And it's fine if you know the content model, you're super familiar with it. But if you are a person who aren't that into whatever is going on, it's very hard for you to find the right thing. And this is what visual editing solves, right? Give you some UI affordance to click on a thing and just get to the place to change it. And even like regardless if this is kind of like on the root level of document or nested into some kind of page builder object, whatever it is. So visual editing and live preview goes hand in hand. And it's kind of like probably like very foundational for great or excellent editorial experience. So what do we need to think about to make this happen? Turns out quite a lot because we have had to think about it. There's so much complexity with this, both like the UX complexity, but also the technical complexity and the fact that we have all of these different contexts and environments like production, preview mode. We have to deal with auth, all of these things. Like you shouldn't be reading all of this. And it's hard. It's so hard. You won't believe it, or you will believe it. But you shouldn't have to think about this. This is our job to kind of like relieve you of all of this stuff, and then you can write some code and just have it work. That's the goal. We want to make hard things seem easy. So that's what kind of like that's the promise with loaders. It enables excellent editorial experience with great developer experience. That's kind of like what we're aiming for here. All right, let's look at what's actually going on here. Kind of you don't have to care about this, but it might be useful to kind of like know what is happening underneath the hood and what loaders are for. So loaders do a lot of things. They take initial, like in preview mode, they take initial preview content from the content lake and then gives that initial preview content to your front-end presentation. Very often that happens server-side if you're in Next or Remix or something. Then it sets up a real-time listener and then feeds that front-end with the real-time updates. If you are in the presentation tool in Sanity Studio, it sets up a listener to between the iframe in the studio, so that and the studio form, so it kind of skips the whole content lake part and just updates the front end via the post channel in the iframe. So it's kind of remains super fast and doesn't go the server round first. What it also does is to deliver content source maps. Some, like, depending on how you implement them, it can be translated into what we call stega strings. So we encode this content source map, which is this kind of like JSON object, into invisible characters in strings. So like the overlay tooling can kind of like figure out where they are and then provide this overlay affordances that you can click. So it does a lot of things underneath the hood. But also importantly, you don't want all of this stuff. This is like a lot of JavaScript that's happening to enable this. You don't want that in production. So loaders also are able to know that, hey, we're in production now. We should fetch the published content. We should probably skip the CDN if like you don't want to use it, and then set the perspectives as published, and then just give you the production content. And we kind of like want to do that for you, so you don't have to think about it. So what does it take to implement loaders? So we need a client with configuration for which Sanity Studio URL to open if you want to use presentation. And like this Stega encoded content source maps strings. You can also opt out of Stega, by the way, and do it more manually if you want that. We need to export a server-specific and a client-specific loader function. Again, this is to kind of keep as much JavaScript out of your production bundle as possible. We need API routes to activate and deactivate preview mode with a secret. And the secret shouldn't be leaked, right? So people who aren't supposed to see upcoming changes can access those things. And for the Next.js app router specifically, you need also to have a preview wrapper for every route you want to preview. Like we really, really like to avoid this, but the way the app router works, it's really hard not to have to do that. So just like a comment there. So let's look at some code. All right. You will find all of this in documentation. We are always working on improving that, and also reference implementations as template and so on. But let's take a quick look at how this kind of looks. It also maybe look different, but depending on your framework. I'll come back to that. But this is like roughly how it looks. First of all, you're setting up the client. You're giving it the Stega configuration. And then you are exporting these different functions and hooks to make this happen from the query store. And then in a server-side component, you can use load query with a Grok query, like you're used to with joins and everything, and it will kind of like load the right data. In a client-side component, you use the use query hook in React at least, and then it will get the initial data and the updated content. You will also get like access to a loading function if you want to kind of like have special behavior depending of if it's loading or not. And then you need to tell this front end how it can enable visual editing mode. And you do that with like setting up the component, giving it calling the use live mode hook. Again, this is a React context, and giving it a studio URL. This might change. Like we might make it a bit simpler than this. And then you take this visual editing component and get it into your front end somehow. Very often, it's good to have it in a layout component, so kind of like it works across everywhere you want to have the previews. Here you see kind of like a Next example. Next have something called draft mode built in. So kind of like a primitive for telling your front end if it's in draft mode or not. And we can use that to load this visual editing component conditionally. And then if you want to have overlays, you need to load them as well. That can be done in a use effect. So it renders after the component has mounted. And it will kind of like look for Stega strings or content source map data attributes in your DOM, and kind of like automatically put these blue squares when you hover over these elements. Whew. So yeah, this was kind of like very rough example of how like this workflow looks. We are also building framework-specific tooling on top of loaders for Next and Remix Hydrogen, Next and Svelte. And the implementation looks somewhat different for all of these. What I didn't mention in the code example is like we need to have a way for the presentation tool to tell the framework about navigation. Stuff like that we will try to kind of like pack into these framework specific tooling, so you don't have to kind of like add a bunch of code to make this work. So keep an eye on updates here. We are getting to patterns where you get a lot of value for very little code. So in summary, adopting loaders, like when should we use them? I think it's a no-brainer for like new projects. Start with using loaders. You don't have to enable all of the visual editing and so on. You can use loaders just to kind of like load the content. You will get value already from there. And when you're ready, you can kind of add these other things. If you have a current project, a mature project, you can roll out support gradually, like do it route by route, component for component. But talk to your content team, like where do they want to start using this? Like maybe it's the blog, maybe it's the product landing page, whatever it is, but like you don't have to do it all at once. The future, like we learn a lot just the few weeks after we launched loaders and presentation tool and all of these things, and we will continue to simplify as we learn more. And our goal here is that when we are providing updates here, you should be able to mostly just delete code, and there should be as minimal refactoring as long as possible. Like we really don't want to make you work more. We want to work less, kind of, or get more stuff done. We're also looking to enable inline editing and like drag and drop stuff and adding and removing elements like in the presentation. And loaders will also help with that kind of stuff. And beyond like visual editing and live previews, we think that loaders can do stuff like handling cache invalidation, because they kind of know the documents that every route is made of. So maybe we can kind of like automate that stuff for you in things like Next. So in summary, like loaders, we think loaders will enable excellent editorial experience and great developer experience. That's the goal. That's what we're doing. And to get started, go to our docs and you can start diving into that. You can look at the tooling, and if you are super interested, you can even read the source code and so on GitHub. We have templates that are going to ship with loaders. We have for Next now, and there will be more in the future. And of course, give us feedback in the community. You can join a channel called Visual Editing in the community Slack and kind of like ask us and give us feedback there. We know that this is new. Not everything is hashed out yet necessarily, but like we really, really like getting your feedback on this, good or bad. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening.